At the moment, it's a building site. But by the time you watch this, it'll be a brand new £1.8 million home for 4 jaguars here at Chester Zoo. Jaguars are big cats. In the wild, they live in the warmth of the tropics and prefer places close to water. So what are the designers of the new Jaguar enclosure doing to recreate that environment? If I stand here in a few weeks' time, I'll be in a 2-metre deep pool of water. Over here, I'll be surrounded by tropical plants and the temperature will be a warm 30 degrees Celsius. And because jaguars can dig and climb, they're going to have to put a big fence around here, going 1 metre into the ground and 5 metres high to stop the cats from clambering out. For any animal to survive and breed in captivity, the zoo has to provide it with an environment that copies its natural habitat as closely as possible. So, when it comes to the new Jaguar exhibit, there's more than just temperature control in a swimming pool to think about. Come and have a look at some of the other animal houses here at Chester. Just around the corner is the home of one of the world's largest living lizards, a Komodo dragon. He's called Regis, and at the tender age of 6, he's already over 2 metres long. In the wild, Komodo dragons live in Indonesia. The zoo hasn't kept lizards like this before, so they had to think very carefully about how to design a new home for Regis. And this is it. Now, I'm reliably informed that Komodo dragons can rip humans to pieces. Thankfully for me, Regis isn't here today. If he was, I certainly wouldn't be. Isolde, this place is amazing. How do you make a Komodo dragon feel at home?
We like to give our dragons at Chester as much space as possible, and we also maintain the temperatures that they're used to living at in the wild, which is between 25 and 40 degrees centigrade. To achieve those areas of temperature, we also put in hot spots and basking areas.
Is that like so they can sunbathe as if they would in their natural habitat?
That's to regulate their body temperature, so if they want to, they can move away from the heat or go to the heat. Before we embarked on the project of keeping Komodo dragons, we contacted all the major dragon keepers in the world, that's in the States and in Europe. All helped us to put this project together.
It's brilliant, isn't it? But I think we should go, because I don't want Regis to come out and find us sitting on his favourite rock, so follow me. Every environment is carefully planned. Knowing how much space an animal needs and understanding its behaviour and biology is vital. Not everyone agrees with keeping animals in captivity, but here at Chester Zoo, it's an important part of their conservation work, looking after and breeding endangered species. I'm off to the Twilight Zone, home to a very special colony of rare fruit bats. They normally live on Rodrigues Island near Mauritius, but the bat population there had fallen. So the Mauritius government asked the zoo to keep and breed a colony of bats here, in case they get completely wiped out in the wild. Matt, this place is like a huge shed.
Well, that's because we knew the bats that live here, like this size and shape, are supposed to fly freely.
What else do they need?
Well, they like lots of places to roost, to feed and to sleep. They also like it to be very warm in here because they're from the tropics. And they like it to be very humid in here because if the air gets too dry, then the skin on their wings tears too easily.
These bats live in trees, but on Rodrigues Island, humans have cleared the forest for farming, destroying their natural habitat and their source of food. Cyclones also hit the island every year. With few trees for protection, many bats get blown out to sea. But places like this can help safeguard the population for the future. Bats are nocturnal, so when it's light they go to sleep. But in a few minutes from now, the lights in here are going to come right down, fooling the bats into thinking it's night time. So before you introduced the bats into the Twilight Zone, was there anything you needed to know or find out about their behaviour?
Well, we knew that they wouldn't sleep and feed in the same tree. And we also knew that they like 12 hours of daylight and 12 hours of nighttime because they're from the tropics. And finally, we know that they like to sleep in very warm, high places in the trees. So we've given them lots of high roosts around the exhibit.
Is that why all the branches and stuff are really up there on that top level?
That's right, and we won't put food up on the highest branches so they know they can sleep there.
They're quite fussy, really, aren't they? You know what they like.
They are.
Every species is adapted to a particular habitat and has its own needs. So, if you were one of the scientists designing a new enclosure, what would you do to make sure the animal felt at home and stayed healthy? There's an alien invader among us, and it's spreading like wildfire. It's destroying local vegetation, invading and then taking over whole habitats. This imposter is strong enough to knock walls over. It can burst through tarmac, and maybe, just maybe, right now, it's disturbing the sleeping dead, because not far from where I'm standing, it seems like this alien has swallowed a whole church graveyard. And this is the invader. No, it's not a creature, but a plant called Japanese knotweed, and it's here in Swansea, in Wales. So far, we've only looked at animals and their habitats, but plants have habitats too. Japanese knotweed is an alien plant because it doesn't normally live in this country. It comes from Asia, but was brought to Europe more than 150 years ago. So, where's the graveyard? Well, it's here. I'm standing right in the middle of it. But as you can see, the knotweed is so dense, you can only just spot the graves. Japanese knotweed is becoming widespread now, but Swansea is the knotweed capital of the UK. It'll grow pretty much anywhere. It's even been found trying to take hold inside houses. What can be done to halt the march of this alien invader? With me is Dick Shaw, Japanese knotweed expert. Dick, what kind of problems does it cause?
Well, apart from the obvious structural problems here, where it's pushing up past gravestones and destroying them, it also causes biological problems, where it displaces native species, driving them out and reducing the range of things that should be here.
Can't you just dig it up or cut it back?
It's very hard, as you can see, to dig or cut the plant. The roots extend to 3 metres down and up to 7 metres across.
Gosh.
And when you consider a piece the quarter of the size of my fingernail is capable of generating a new plant, the task is almost impossible.
What about weed killer chemicals to get rid of it?
You have to be extremely careful with chemicals. The plant likes growing by rivers, and you're restricted in what you can use, and you have to repeat the sprays 3 or 4 times a year.
Gosh, this is such a mammoth task, isn't it, Dick?
Yes, you have to feel sorry for the people that have to manage the land.
Definitely. The Japanese knotweed invasion is a major environmental nuisance. Since knotweed arrived first in the UK, its population has well and truly got out of hand. And it can all be traced back to just one mother plant, brought here by someone just to look nice in his garden. This is unbelievable, it's so dense.
You think we've taken a wrong turn?
Oh, I think we might have actually. Is the knotweed a problem in its native habitat in Japan?
No, definitely not. It's just an ordinary member of the plant community. It's not invasive. People actually eat it. It's not just people that eat it. There are dozens of organisms that are also found feeding on the plant.
What kind of things?
Things like, well, insects, moths and beetles, and also various fungi.
Why does it do so well in this country?
Well, if you look at the plant here, there's nothing feeding on it. There's no damage, and that's why it has an unfair advantage over its new neighbours. It came in without these natural enemies because it was a desirable plant. And the Victorians didn't want a damaged-looking plant in their gardens. Wherever it takes root, it can take over.
What can we do to try and keep it under control?
Well, the hope is that if we go back to Japan and find the things that do feed on it, amongst the multitude of organisms that will be there will be some that have evolved to be very specific just to this plant. And our job will be to test it and make sure that they are specific and safe to introduce.
OK, Dick, I think we should get out of here so you can make a start now. Which way did we come in? The reason this plant is growing so well in Britain is nothing feeds on it. It's a real problem because there are plenty of habitats here where it can thrive. Take a look where you live. This alien might just be invading right now. While the population of Japanese knotweed is booming, other species aren't quite so lucky. This is a water vole, a creature now threatened with extinction. Up until a few months ago, this riverbank was its home, but for its own safety, the water vole was captured, along with 5 others, and brought here to Blackpool Zoo.
This is a River Don near Doncaster where we needed to do some work to help reduce flooding levels in the town, and it involved work actually on the banks of the river which would disturb the water vole's habitat, and that's why we needed to move them away while that work was done.
At the zoo, the water voles have had several health checks, and Ian Valentine's team have tagged each animal with a microchip to help with identification.
Chipping of an animal is important because it allows us to identify the animal on an individual basis. If it was a large animal, it would be very easy to put a tattoo or an ear tag on it, but for a small animal it's not so feasible. And therefore you use this injector and inject the small microchip, which is about the same size as a grain of rice. Once this is into the animal, you can then use a reader, pass it over in front of the chip, and you then have a number which is identifiable.
When the water voles are released back into the wild, the Environment Agency will check that they're okay, and microchipping makes that job a lot easier. Today, 2 pairs of water voles are being taken back to Doncaster by the Environment Agency. 1 pair will remain at the zoo, where hopefully they'll breed and produce younger animals that can be released back into the wild at a later date. So much care is being taken because water voles are now one of the most endangered species in the UK. So what are the reasons for their population decline?
One of them is the effect that American mink has had on them. The American mink is not an animal which should be here. It's been introduced into this country. And they prey quite heavily on water voles. A few other things which are causing them problems are the destruction of their habitat, and also pollution. Serious pollution of the waterways causes tremendous problems for the water voles themselves.
The building work on the River Don is finished, so it's time to let these water voles go back home. First, they're released into special cages on the water's edge.
The cage is designed so that it's enclosed on all sides and the top, but it's actually open underneath, so that when the water voles are in there, because they're burrowing animals, they do have an opportunity to actually burrow into the bank and create a home for themselves before they finally enter the wild. The cage itself will give them some protection from predators, other animals that might come and eat them. And inside we've got a plastic box with hay in that they can get underneath that's dry and provides a nest for them to be in.
All this work for the safety of only a handful of water voles.
If we just let the water voles go into the wild with no cage, they would have been very confused. They've been used to being looked after in the zoo and would probably have just run off and not survived. Hopefully they will start to feel comfortable on the site and start to make burrows themselves and burrow out, and in that way we'll know that they're happy at the site.
Water voles are under threat because all over the country their habitat is being destroyed, and because of predators like mink. But think about it, what else could cause a population to decrease? I'm in the middle of Thetford Forest in East Anglia, home to one of the last remaining populations of red squirrels in southern Britain. Except I haven't seen a single one yet, so I'm off to meet Janie Steele for some squirrel spotting tips. It's her job to estimate how many squirrels actually live here. Red squirrels have lived in our woodlands for thousands of years. They were kept as pets, even eaten in centuries gone by, but their population has declined by 75% over the last 30 years. Hi, Janie. Hi, Claire. I guess the problem with studying an endangered species like the red squirrel is you don't get to see them very often.
That's right, I can go weeks without seeing one.
So why are they in decline?
Well, years ago, the red squirrel was all over Britain. But about 100 years ago, the grey squirrel was brought over from America, and it competes with the red squirrel for resources such as food and habitat. And we've also faced with this disease problem as well. There's a disease called parapox virus, which is fatal to the reds, but it doesn't affect the greys.
So what can you do to try and help things?
Well, my job is to study the red and grey squirrels in their natural habitat, and also to try and increase the numbers of red squirrels that we've got here.
How can you study them, Jamie, when you never see them?
Well, if you come with me, I'll show you.
OK. Throughout the forest, Janie uses all sorts of different sampling techniques to try and get a picture of how many squirrels are living here and whether they're reds or greys.
So this is a hair tube, just a normal piece of pipe attached to the tree, and we use these to survey an area for squirrels. Got some food in the middle there, which serves to attract the squirrels, and some sticky tape at either end, so hopefully when they come along they actually leave some hair.
And you'll be able to tell.
On the sticky tape, yeah. I put this one up last week, so we'll have a look.
See if any of them have been in the tube for a nibble of those nuts.
Right, looks like grey squirrel there, and that definitely looks like red. It's not always as easy as that to tell, but it certainly looks like red squirrel, which means they're around this area, which is great.
Good news. Let's have a look, see what else you've got.
OK. So this is a piece of the forest floor that I've raked. It's 50 metres long by 1 metre wide. And every so often I come along and look for the feeding remains for squirrels. Look, like here, we've got a pine cone that they've stripped and taken all the seeds out of. There's one with all the seeds still in it.
And what can you tell from this?
We can get a rough idea of apart from where they're feeding, but how many animals are actually feeding in an area.
Can you also tell if that's a red or a grey one that's eating that?
Unfortunately not, no.
It's a shame, isn't it?
Isn't it? Yeah, the only way we can tell which species it is by trapping. And I've got a lot of these traps up around the forest. There's a grey squirrel in here. I set this trap this morning.
It looks like it's got a red face, though.
Yeah, a lot of people make mistakes identifying greys as reds because of the colouring. They've got red on their face and their paws and down the back too.
So what would you do if it was a red?
If it was a red squirrel, I'd put one of these on, a radio collar, sends out a signal, and I can follow it all over the forest.
And track it. We set out to find a red squirrel that Janie had tagged earlier. So, Janie, this is how you track the red squirrels, then?
That's right, yep. We're just following the strongest signal, and we're certainly getting closer.
It seems to be coming from that tree over there, actually.
Yep, I would say it's up in that tree.
So, you can't see it, but you know it's there?
That's right, yeah, that's the beauty of radio tracking.
How many red squirrels do you reckon there are in the forest?
Less than 50.
The two main threats to red squirrels are competition for resources and disease. Here at Thetford, they're hoping to increase the number of reds by breeding them in captivity. But it's no good releasing them straight away whilst there's still the threat of disease. So Janie's hoping that a vaccine against the parapox virus will be developed before she releases them back into the wild. All over the world, 11,000 species of plants and animals are facing a high risk of extinction, and that number is rising. In almost every case, it's because of the damage that people are doing to the environment. How can we prevent more species becoming extinct in the future?